Sometimes people call video games a power fantasy, and sometimes they're right. It's not always a bad thing, after all. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanx, 10 games where you eventually become stupidly powerful. Starting off with number 10, it's Dragon's Dogma 2. This game, like the first game, starts off pretty rough. You're weak, you're slow, and for the first few hours, you stay that way. You do eventually start to get stronger, though. You learn skills that make fighting monsters easier. The key word here is eventually, though. There are plenty of games where you become stupidly powerful, but for this list, I think we're going to talk about ones where it takes a while to get there. You don't always have to start the game off as a total chump who's struggling to beat up a goblin, but there's a pretty noticeable difference between how the game plays at the start and at the end. Dragon's Dogma 2 almost feels like a different game once you've powered up. The real game changer comes when you unlock the Wayfarer class, which allows you to equip any weapon in the game and switch between them whenever you want. The class also lets you equip any ability you've unlocked, and just playing as the class makes it so all your classes level up, so there's really no reason not to switch to being a Wayfarer at the end of the game. It's just absurdly powerful. Now, you can combine the abilities of a mage, a warrior, an archer, a thief, whatever you want. You can mix and match your most powerful skills, and you can heal yourself with just the press of a button. The most important thing, though, is that you can just melt enemies. By the end of the game, stuff that used to take 10 minutes of hacking away at, you can just, kill. If you use the right skills, it's done. You take the letter S off the word skills. It's kills. You rack 'em up. It is ridiculous how much of a killing machine you become with the right combination of abilities in this game. At number 9 is The Forest / Sons of the Forest. The contrast from where you start in these games and where you end, it is sharp, to say the very least. In the opening hours, you're a caveman, rubbing rocks together, and by the end, you're walking through hordes of monstrous freaks, mowing them down with shotguns, machine guns, and a katana sword, clad in golden armor. Now that's a power curve right there. The game starts you off with only a few basic supplies and the clothes on your back. The best you've got is an emergency axe and maybe a sharpened stick to ward off the locals, but through exploration, you eventually upgrade your arsenal with a more powerful and more effective array of equipment. Pretty much the only way you're going to be upgrading yourself is by finding stuff, so exploration is, of course, highly incentivized in that situation. You can never make a bow that's as good as the compound bow. You can't build a gun out of rocks, so you're forced to find this stuff. Certain locations, they're too dangerous without the proper equipment, too. And unlike games like Dying Light, for example, your guy doesn't start the game out as a parkour badass. You're pretty vulnerable until you start getting some of the better equipment out there. A lot of survival games go from struggling to survive to unkillable god after playing them for a while, but the path of progression in the Forest games, it does feel more satisfying to me than a lot of them. At number 8 is Crackdown. You start off pretty tough in Crackdown. You're a super soldier, but that is only a taste of how over the top you become at higher levels in this game. What's noteworthy about Crackdown is how the game basically starts you off slightly overpowered. Hey, you're an open world game protagonist. What's new there, right? But it eventually just turns you into a superhero, flat out. You start off with a little pea shooter, a barely there vertical leap. You die easy from swarms of enemies, which you're constantly fighting, but kill enough bad guys, collect enough orbs, and your dude evolves. In Crackdown, you don't just feel the power increase, you see it, because your guy gets taller, beefier, or whatever. It allows him to run around faster, jump higher, cause more mayhem. The weapons get more and more over the top, too. By the end, you're just jumping over buildings, cutting down enemies by the dozens without breaking a sweat. It's not that you were breaking a sweat before. The game isn't that hard overall, but the way the game doles out powers is pretty satisfying in a simple, straightforward kind of way. You pick up orbs, you get stronger. Simple as that. And you get very strong after you collect a lot of them. And number 7 is Control, another one of those games where you get pretty strong pretty quick, but the game just keeps throwing new powers your way. The way you're playing the game the first few hours just looks completely different than the last few. At the start of the game, you're mostly limited to basic pistol and psychic throws, which is fun, but not super powerful. Once you get the levitate power, the game really starts to open up. It lets you infinitely hover in the air and rain death down on your enemies. It's one of my all-time favorite hover powers in games. The animation just sells it, and when you combine it with all the other powers, you eventually you really feel unstoppable. I mean, the game literally makes you unstoppable for the finale, giving you infinite power to just absolutely destroy everything that stands in your way. Everything you do by the end feels really overpowered. I mean, you can literally just convert enemies to your side and have them fight for you until they die. The only downside here is that you're still pretty vulnerable. Doesn't take a lot to kill you, but with the right upgrades and power usage, it's not that much of an issue. At number 6 is Alex 2. For this entry, pretty much any Piranha Bytes RPG could work. Gothic, Risen, Alex, they all start you off as a chump who's tripping over their own shoelaces, and eventually you get godlike powers. But for me, Alex probably gives you the most dramatic transformation. Alex 2 starts you out a little bit tougher than the first game, but you're still a goober in rags trying to fight off mutant rats with a stick. That's how it starts anyway. Death is a constant companion and all the NPCs treat you like a chump. Takes dozens of hours of struggle and toil. It feels like everything's working against you in these games, but eventually you're a laser minigun wielding badass in power armor who also has magic powers that can make people obey your every whim. By the end of the game, you're mowing down dozens of monsters at a time, and I mean, that's the complete contrast to when you can barely fight a single enemy at the start of the game. It's that huge power gap that makes the game so notable to me. It's like Fallout if Bethesda hated your guts and dared you to keep playing, rather than handing you a set of power armor in the first few hours. I'm not really a huge fan of Piranha Bytes games, the Alex games in particular, but there's no denying that the progression in these games takes you from zero to hero. And number 5 is Infamous. You get stronger pretty much in every Infamous game, but in my mind, the biggest difference between how you start and how you end is definitely the first of them. In terms of ultimate power, I think the later games have a higher ceiling, but both Infamous 2 and Second Son start you off at a higher level. In the first game, you just to start off at rock bottom. At first, the lightning powers Cole gets at the start of the game feel more like a curse than a blessing. You die if you touch water, and if you go to an unpowered section of the city, you're almost completely helpless. The powers you have at the start, they're really weak, and you die easily unless you're constantly taking cover. At first, Infamous feels more like an open-world cover shooter than a superhero game, but as you power up and earn new abilities, how you're actually playing the game slowly starts to change. By the end, you're just battling out giant swarms of enemies with high-tech secret society guys backing them up, any of which would have wiped the floor with you during the first few hours. But now you can just brush them aside with ease. When you unlock that ultimate lightning strike attack, you feel unstoppable in a way the other games just never managed to capture. And number 4 is Skyrim. All of the Bethesda games give you the tools to get extremely overpowered, but in Fallout's case, it's a little too easy. And Oblivion has a kind of inverse problem where the game makes you feel weaker as you level up because of the goofy level scaling. Very wonky, very don't love it. I love Oblivion, but that's probably one of the downsides of it in my opinion. Skyrim, on the other hand, hits the sweet spot. Sure, you can just pump points into stealth and archer and you basically become an unstoppable killing machine, but even that takes some prep work to fully take advantage of and not something you can do from minute 1. There's also the infamous restoration potion trick that lets you completely break the game if you want, but even that's not necessary to feel super powerful in Skyrim, even if it's fun to reach the point where you're literally untouchable and can kill everyone in a single hit. That's the thing about Skyrim, the game gives you many different ways to become overpowered, from supercharging your spells to using tricks and crafting to make overpowered weapons. I mean, it's a playground if you want to become stupidly powerful. And unlike some of Bethesda's other games, it still takes some effort to pull it off. The restoration trick is powerful, but it does take some time and preparation, same as a lot of the other overpowered tricks and builds in the game. Breaking Skyrim's difficulty wide open is a time-honored tradition at this point. It's one of the best things about the game, even if at a certain point getting overpowered is practically inevitable. And number 3 is Hogwarts Legacy. There's plenty of games that give you the tools to be absolutely absurdly overpowered, but few games do it in a way that makes it quite as easy as this one. The Dark Arts take this to like a new level. You can literally cast a spell that curses all the enemies around you, then follow up with the death spell, and that's it, everyone's dead. You get a free-to-use instant death spell for all, with the only downside being that it's one with a time limit. But with overpowered potions and the also overpowered ancient magic stuff, you'll be able to cast death again in no time flat. If you know all the combos, you can completely dominate all opposition in this game, and it frankly feels wrong sometimes. I mean, isn't this supposed to be like a family-friendly kids game? Are you really supposed to be the god of death reaping his grim harvest? You might think there would be some story drawback to using dark magic too, but other than ruining some NPCs' lives, which is more funny than anything else, there isn't. So kill everything you see as much as you like. So have fun, kids. Kind of a far cry from where you start the game, fighting literal school children, but every unstoppable killing machine has to start somewhere, right? And number 2 is Path of Exile. For this entry, all you really need to do is look at some footage of the early game versus the end game. That might as well be 2 completely different games. When Path of Exile starts, you're a shipwrecked survivor fighting off zombies with a piece of driftwood. It's like Diablo if you somehow started off even lower than those games. You're slow, each enemy takes a while, and, well, you could die from only a few attacks. Compare that to the end game where you're just a human tornado fighting dozens, if not hundreds of enemies at one time. The screen is just covered in crazy effects. Everything is dying all over the place, and you are the eye of the storm. And that's just me playing on a hopelessly unoptimized build. This game can get so much crazier than even this. A lot of RPGs have you starting off fighting slimes, and by the end you're literally facing God. But the actual power increase is basically meaningless. You don't actually feel any stronger at the end of the game because it's all just numbers. In Path of Exile, when you're fighting the gods at the end, you feel like a god. And finally, at number 1, the Earth Defense Force series. The power level you start at in these games is already pretty absurd, but it's nothing compared to the end. The Earth Defense Force games have always started simple with a basic machine gun or a shotgun that can kill a giant in a few hits, but as you progress through the campaign, you find better equipment, things quickly spiral out of control. At the highest levels, you can get weapons that don't just mow down dozens of enemies in seconds and can destroy entire enemy motherships in a few hits, they can also completely level an entire city block. By the end of this game, you're a bigger danger to Earth than the invaders. I don't know who's making these absolutely insane weapons, but I think they may be a little too effective. You're supposed to save the city, not, do this. You're blowing it up. You're blowing the city up. These are games that just revel in the absurd. They just throw in whatever, regardless of how much sense it makes, or how much it will affect performance for that matter. In Earth Defense Force, if you fire a gun and suddenly everything goes into slow motion, it's not like an effect. It's probably just a really good gun that's not exactly going easy on your computer. That's a good gun. The amount of destruction you can bring to bear as this dorky little soldier is completely stupid, and I mean that in the best possible way. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconHero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.